Round 2 of the 2023 Formula One season is right around the corner, and if you're anyone not named Sergio Perez or Max Verstappen, you might be worried. This is Into the Chicane, a Formula One podcast with me, Channing Apodaca, and as always, joined by my good friend Brandon Wood.
Hello.
It's good to be back. Little preview of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix coming up for you guys. A little bit of news and notes to touch on. We'll have some predictions. We'll have a fantasy recap for our fantasy league that we're in with a couple of our F1 buddies and our F1 party people. Start this thing off. We got a little bit more insight from Lance Stroll on all his social media about the accident that he was involved in prior to testing. He put out like a long, detailed post and it was almost like a Sarah McLachlan slideshow. Did you watch it?
It was beautiful.
It was nice.
It was very touching to get to see.
So yeah, he put out a big long social media post detailing everything that went down with his bike accident. He gave a timeline. He gave all the info of what the doctors did, what they saw, and then how he was feeling throughout the entire thing. And all it did for me personally was enhance my thoughts on Lance Stroll. To me, it made him just look even better, and just was more of like a shock that he went through with the race and everything.
Yeah, it was weird when we first were finding out about everything because the team was being very hush-hush about everything.
Right.
There wasn't too much information, so we were trying to just really figure out what really was happening. So
yeah, there was even a little bit of I don't know if you felt the same way, but I was like, I mean, when did this even happen?
Exactly.
Did this happen 2 months ago?
Yeah.
And they're just stretching the timeline of the recovery process, or did this really happen 2 weeks ago? And it really did. It was, less than a month or whatever before testing was supposed to start. But I mean, he had video of himself walking around, looking like the kid from what's the baseball movie? Rookie of the Year.
Rookie of the Year, yeah.
But with both arms, with his hand stuck like that, and then he did a lot of little stretches. It seemed like he was doing strength training with his fingers all day just to get that dexterity back in his hands. The Aston Martin train, as we've been calling it, is just chugging along, gaining points and notoriety with people like me who were hating on him. Lawrence Stroll, in more Aston Martin news, said to be investing more money. Do you have a number of how much more money he's going to be investing into Aston Martin F1?
I didn't hear a number, but it was the impression that I got was that it was like somewhat significant. It's cool to hear that he's going to be pushing even more to really get this to be a championship contending team.
Right. Is this personal money that he's putting in, or is it like company allocated funds that he's just going to rearrange into the F1 team?
No. What the impression I got was that it had personal.
So it's like a Gene Haas type of a thing.
Yeah, he's like,
wow. Yeah. I looked it up today. Forbes has him at, I think it was $2.9 or $3.9 billion. So pretty sure he can afford the scratch.
Yeah, I'm sure Aston Martin can afford the scratch now that their stock price went up after.
Oh yeah,
Alonso's podium.
Yeah, you sent that picture over. I don't remember how much it was, but it was. The actual stock price of Aston Martin, the company, went up significantly just over the weekend of a Grand Prix. So if anybody's doubting the level of impact that this sport can have on economy, there we have it right there. It went up almost 78 points in 5 days. I don't know the stock market. That's good.
It looks good.
It's all green.
It was 38%.
So 38% of what they had before. I'm going to try and just sound like 38% of net revenue gain.
Not technically, no, but
okay.
Yeah.
But it sounded good.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like, if you get back good return on an investment, why not dump more? That's like if you're betting, if you're gambling, if you're in Vegas, and hitting on blackjack has when you see 10 or doubling down on blackjack has been working for you, then what do? You keep doing it. He's already funneling money into this. He sees good return on it. Let's funnel more money into this. I think it's a great fucking idea.
Yeah, and I think with the Formula One team, you got maybe slightly better odds than a blackjack table.
100%.
But
especially, you're playing with aces and everybody else is playing with fours, you know?
Yeah.
When that's the way the season looks so far after only 2 rounds.
Yeah, so maybe Lawrence will take some of that money, invested in purchasing some more engineers contracts from Red Bull, you know, for this upcoming seasons.
Yeah, that's that. Wow, I didn't even think about it in that. I was thinking about more of from a development standpoint, but yeah, if they want to just use all that money to keep hiring Red Bull people, was it France Toss said something about that?
Yeah, he made a comment. Let me see what it was exactly.
Yeah, see if you can pull that up.
Aston Martin took half the aerodynamic employees from Red Bull. Of course, they build the same car and paint it green.
I'm curious how many, when he says Red Bull, how many of those people were AlphaTauri? Because Franz Tost does not technically work for Red Bull Racing.
No, and I think
he's AlphaTauri.
Yeah, and I think that comment came from an article where he was talking about how because they're and partially because of the relationship that AlphaTauri has with the regular Red Bull Racing team and how that's kind of changed over the past couple of years, how they can't just like up and copy Red Bull. They can't do the same thing that he's claiming that Aston Martin doing.
Yeah.
So I think France kind of feels a little bit of
resentment there.
Oh,
I'm sure.
Just follow in their footsteps.
Yeah. For a long time, it seemed like when they were Toro Rosso and even a little bit into the transition to AlphaTauri, which I mean, no transition, just a name shame really. But name shame, is that what I said?
Name shame, yeah.
Name shame? Name change. Name shame is an incense that we use.
Nong Champa?
But they used to have a lot more similar aero design, plus the power unit. And then when they switched over to AlphaTauri and they made it a point to separate themselves, they started really falling back. So now to see another team doing it when they're the ones technically really in the spotlight to be like, AlphaTauri, you guys can't do this, because that would just be like it
would instantly get in trouble.
Yeah, it'd be a conflict of interest almost, you know. Yeah. But Aston Martin has been basically taking other teams' models for the past since they were Force India.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Yes, they did take some of the basic design principles from the Red Bull car, but they did have to like make some adjustments in order to like have it fit their exact package, right? So you have to give them some credit in being able to like adapt that.
I'm not discrediting them at all.
For sure. That's what I'm just saying. Like, generally when people make those criticisms of saying that they just copied Red Bull, it's like, oh, well, they just they just took it off of here and they put it on there.
Right.
It doesn't kind of work like that. Like, you have to really have it still make sense within the package.
Yeah, they have a different engine supplier, so their aero and their engine have to talk to each other correctly.
Their rear end is different.
And also, there's only certain things that they can really copy. Everything else needs to be developed. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain things, I don't want to call it spec, that are regulated within.
Yeah, the FIA only gives them so much play in certain areas of development. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's funny. That they feel that way, because like I said, you know, AlphaTauri is kind of shit out of luck in that department. They're going to have a magnifying glass on their comparisons between them and the sister team until they're around, which might not be for long. But Aston Martin, man, they don't give a shit. They'll copy whoever they want, whenever they want.
Hey, do what you got to do.
Whatever works, man. That's the game. Other news, we had Ferrari's first missteps. And when did it happen? First race of the season, of course, because why not? They're Ferrari. That's what they do. We found out, we were just talking about this right before we hit the red button, that Charles Leclerc's retirement was caused by human error in the electrical store assembly. You did a little bit more research into this. Break that down.
Well, I guess before the race, they had a problem with one of a couple components in the electrical store, and they replaced it before the race. And when it got replaced, apparently they did it incorrectly. So
they had an issue on one electrical power unit, replaced it with another, and then that's one unit used, replaced it with another, and then when they put that one in,
installed it incorrectly, which ended up rendering it unusable.
Yeah.
So now
they're on their third in Charles's car.
On the third, he's going to have to end up taking a grid penalty.
Is it is he looking towards a grid penalty on the next ERS replacement? Is it? I don't even know if it's considered part of ERS, but on
it's if he takes any more. He's taken 2 already.
So he's used 2 of 2.
Yeah.
But he's on his 3rd. Is it units or replacements? So basically, this one has to go for the rest of the season.
He's allowed 2 changes, I think.
Okay,
and so he did the 2 changes.
So he's technically allowed 3 units.
I guess.
Yeah.
Probably.
So one more and he takes a penalty. So eventually in this season, he's going to take a penalty on that. That's, there's no getting around that.
Yeah. If it doesn't happen soon, it'll happen eventually.
Yeah. They're going to want to make this one go as far as they can. Which isn't, there's no shock there. Like, it happens throughout the season. A power unit changes, you end up taking grid penalties. Almost everybody at some point, I feel like, will take one, especially the top teams because they're running their cars so hard.
Yeah, we saw a bunch of them last year.
Yeah, that's not really... It's news in that it's so early. That sucks. But like I said, he's going to have to take one eventually. Let's see what else. Fred Vasseur was given the green light to make major changes. When did this get, announced?
So apparently after the first race, they all had a nice little get together.
Wow. Emergency team meetings were a running theme after round 1, huh?
Yeah. It seemed everybody was kind of wanting to regroup and figure out what their plan is for the rest of the year.
Yeah, there was probably 1 or 2 teams that, took a smoke break after Sunday.
Yeah, and so I had heard that the Ferrari team, one of the things that we're working on building up to the first race was their pit stops, right? Mm-hmm. So the team worked really hard.
Seemed after like last year getting their wheel gun run over.
They had all kinds of weird issues last year with their pit stops, and from the first race, everything looked smooth. They had some pretty quick ones. Seems like they got that worked out, but there's still some lingering issues, I think. Obviously there are still some lingering issues, but apparently with them giving Vasseur a little bit more of a leeway to make some personnel changes.
I wonder what that means or what that's going to, add up to in the end. Like, what sort of changes do you think he's going to make? Do you think he's going to make personnel changes in the pit? Is it going to be on the pit wall? Could it be strategy?
Yeah, I feel like if because of the point we're at now, it is more of a strategy crew.
That's what I
kind
think.
Of a thing. So, I wouldn't really expect to see too many changes in personnel on the development technical side, but maybe, I don't know. But I feel like we'll probably see more changes with kind of just people in the crew, strategists of the sort.
Or I wonder if it's less of a personnel and maybe just more of their overall outlook on the way that they do things, operationally. We're going to make some changes on how we go about.
Sure, yeah.
Interesting. We'll see,
Yeah, they said major, so it could be pretty sweeping.
Lando? You never know.
I don't know about that yet.
Yeah, not yet. A little too early to call. Maybe next year.
Oh.
And then I found this interesting. Leclerc, after the race, was quoted as saying that Red Bull was on another planet with their pace.
Yeah, and I went back and watched the first, I guess, 5 to 10 laps of the race just from Charles's perspective. I watched a couple other drivers as well, but when I was watching Charles, I wanted to see kind of what it was like from his point of view, somewhat on the start, but also being behind Max and kind of how he was handling the car in relationship to Max, and it didn't seem like that Charles was struggling in any particular moments. It didn't seem like he was fighting the car too much. It just looked like it just didn't have the same drive, didn't have the same hookup that, watching the Red Bull, especially from behind, it looked so darty and just light.
Yeah.
And that was something that I really clocked just watching from Charles' point of view.
Their cornering and just the way that Red Bull was able to angle was, and still is, just on another level from everybody else. Like I said last week, Max was up 5 seconds in the first 6 laps. That's just literally a pace like no other. The team telling him, slow down, take it easy. Let's save some wear and tear on the motor. It's just interesting how much other teams took notice of that, especially after only one round. Especially a team like Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, who was, supposed to be battling for the world championship again this year, to just be like, yeah, it's after one round, everybody, saying things like this, that their pace is on another planet is just, it's funny, it's interesting, and it's going to be the talk of the season, them and Aston Martin. So if we sound like we're beating a dead horse with how fast Red Bull is and how far ahead of competition they are, sorry, but that's what it's just going to become, the bar.
It's reality.
Yeah, and we're going to hear more and more quotes about that. Speaking of another team who, is on tough times, McLaren seems to have their heads held a little higher than we thought, or at least than I thought. I still think that they are, quote unquote, down bad, as I've been saying. Cue sad Lando. But Lando Norris was, seemed in good spirits after the race. He made some lighthearted jokes about the entire Bahrain Grand Prix being just nice pit crew practice for the team.
It was.
It was. They got, between the two of them, they got six pits in, which,
Yeah.
they were probably going to run out of tires at a certain point. They were going to have nothing left but interims and wets.
Yeah, Lando got to get in there and follow the leaders around for a little bit.
Yeah, and then looking back on it, I can see where his spirits would be high because he did qualify P11, and I completely forgot that on the first lap, aside from all the struggles that they had, with him especially, on the first lap, he gained 2 positions. He ended up in P9 after lap 1.
He had a good start, yeah.
So, I think I read an article about him after the race where he was like, the pace was good, but we just had too many technical errors. And then we found out after the race that the technical error that they were experiencing was, what was that, a pneumatic pressure leak?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a pneumatic pressure leak that led to his big downfall in that race, plus, Oscar Piastri's whole disaster. We won't get into that. You can listen to the last episode if you want to get more into that. So they seem to have, higher spirits than what I assume they would.
Yeah.
It still doesn't stop the media swirling. It still doesn't stop the optical outlook that we can all see that's going on in their team. Maybe they're posturing, they might be peacocking a little bit, being like, it's not that bad, because they did seem to get a lot of talk about them, especially with, we've talked about it, all the rumors swirling about Lando. That's not going away.
Yeah.
He did say, I don't remember where I got this quote from, but I did hear him say that McLaren is the place for him, and he's going to see it out. Again, it's one of those things that it's a PR move. They have to say that.
Yeah.
He could sign with Ferrari potentially tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be shocked, but I wouldn't be too shocked, I guess you would say.
Yeah. I was doing a little more digging into this, and we were talking about this the other day, actually. McLaren, very late into the end of the year last year, they changed their concept, their overall aero concept. And so from what I understand, that is a huge reason as to why they're in the position they're in right now, right? Because they had to start from scratch essentially and redevelop all over. So what we're seeing is, kind of looks like abysmal situation is actually maybe not as bad, because they know that they just have to get through these little humps of these, figuring out the little technical things of this part and that part.
They might see a light at the end of the tunnel that the rest of us don't, because they have inside information into what's in there.
They have a much better understanding of why they're at where they're at right now.
Yeah.
It's not because they're in the dark trying to figure out what they're doing with their car. They have a direction and they're on their path towards it.
Right.
They just haven't quite gotten there yet. We're just seeing a little lapse in time, partially because they started so late and partially because they don't have, even though they had some of an advantage because of where they finished last year, they don't have the same resources as some of the other teams to be able to really make up a lot of gains when they're behind.
They should. They are still fucking McLaren. You know what I mean? That's
True.
It's a giant company.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of posturing in that for them. if they're saying these things that, yes, there is, quote, light at the end of the tunnel for us, because you can't stop the optics of what we saw from them. And you can't stop what we saw on Zach Brown's face, Lando Norris's face, any of that. I do think.
And I think that's some of that is just like literally just like the sad Lando thing. It's not even as much like sad. It's just kind of like it's embarrassing to be in that situation, right? Even though he knows and understands why he's there, and he's probably not stressing about it too much, but it still sucks to be there and be like finishing far below where you can achieve.
Especially when the team was on the rise a few seasons ago, and he's part of like we'll call it a draft class of a bunch of drivers who are world-class talents. Him, Max, Charles, George. I even think Alex is in there, but all that encompassed, the rumor mill, like we've talked about with him, is swirling. We're not the only ones saying it. There's a lot of talk about him going to potentially a Red Bull, a Ferrari. I think Red Bull is still the top one. And then, maybe even the Audi team, should that, when that comes to fruition. And big news on the McLaren train before we switch gears. Christian Horner announced that McLaren has, in fact, expressed interest in using a Red Bull powertrain in 2026.
Huh.
Yep.
Is that
They have reached out.
Interesting. I wonder if that's in order, like a little play to get a better negotiation with Honda.
Honda?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Honda re-entering. I thought you were going to say with the Mercedes deal. I don't know, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
the Red Bull,
if Honda's been in talks with McLaren about partnering, and they come back with like, oh, well, Red Bull said they'd offer us only this much, and
that's true.
This and that, so
that's true. They could be the first team outside of the Red Bull family to be using a Red Bull powertrain.
That would be interesting.
And who knows if Red Bull even wants to do that? Red Bull might just want to keep it all in house.
Maybe they feel comfortable giving McLaren one of their engines as opposed to, say, Aston Martin.
Let's say maybe they can put a deal in place and say, you give us Lando Norris at a cheap price without this giant buyout, and we will give you guys a discounted engine supply for X amount of years.
Hey.
I don't know how that paperwork works, but let's see it.
We shall see.
Yeah. And while we're on McLaren, I had a random thought. I don't remember where I was at. I was in the car. I was somewhere, and I was thinking about just how everything has stacked up so far, where everybody's at. The teams that seem to be on the rise, the Haas's, the Williams, those two in particular, and thinking that we don't have a definitive, what I would call a thumper this season. It's like thumper is this old hockey term, or at least it was used in a movie, and I've used it since then, where like somebody who is going to be the last one to cross the line. For a few years, it was Williams. You knew that Nicholas Latifi, should he not DNF, was going to finish last. When Nikita Mazepin or Mick Schumacher were in that car, you knew it was going to be one of them. It was going to be one of those four. With those two teams looking so much better, we don't have a definitive last place finisher where you can go, all right, they don't crash, they're finishing a lap and a half behind the rest of the pack. I think that, should things stay in the dark for McLaren, that could be them this year.
It's possible. Here's the thing. I was thinking about this a lot when you brought it up, and I had a really hard time coming up with one for the very same reasons. This year it's so competitive in that mid back of the field that on any given weekend, it could be any team for any given reason.
I think it's going to be competitive everywhere except the front.
Pretty much.
Yeah. It looks like I said, we're going to beat this dead horse. Like Red Bull's going to run away with it. But other than that, the good teams look good, but there's a big blend between the middle and the back of the pack. It kind of just, there's no middle class here.
Yeah. Here's the thing. There's been a bunch of teams saying that.
What is this, the United States? There's no middle class.
last thing we want to see is a bunch of teams riding off this year.
Yeah. You bring 3 races to the United States and suddenly there's no middle class in F1. All right, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, there hasn't been one for a long time. So.
What are you saying?
So I forgot what I was saying. So like a lot of teams, we've heard that this will end up being a year used to prepare for 2024 for a bunch of teams. So
Yeah.
with that being said,
That's good.
it's
More competitive.
it's good, more competitive, but teams like Williams, for instance, right? Like they're one team that said our focus now is maybe going to be towards 2024. Even though they had a really good showing on the first race, could that be just because
Could it be sustainable?
Could it be sustainable? That's the thing I'm worried about, because maybe the first round they just lucked out by the rest of the field not having their act together quite yet, and Williams just having a like decently mid car that was already kind of just set up to be able to go out there and run a decent race, but maybe not to go out there and really compete in the midfield like the rest of the cars maybe can in a couple of races once they've gotten things a little more figured out.
Yeah. So like just sustainability. You know what I mean? Like once the dust settles, are they still going to be in this position?
Yeah, as teams start unveiling upgrades and
Right.
we get to some different tracks with some different characteristics, things will probably shuffle it up a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like unfortunately, there's a chance that it could be Williams at the back, although I would not really want to see that. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, I think if you were to ask a lot of the pundits, the bigger names in the sport, they would still say that Williams is probably going to finish on the back. We'll get a better look, I think, this coming weekend. Just because it's, another week down, we'll see if everything that happened in round 1 replays itself, then it will get a more definitive outlook on how real all these, predictions and everything that we've thought far.
Although
are true.
Jeddah is not too dissimilar from Bahrain in some instances. I mean, it's it's a street track. It's a little tighter, but it is very high speed,
very fast, very
fast.
Very narrow, and then you also get a lot of similarities in like track temperature, how the car deals in that sort of environment.
Yeah, not quite as bad as Bahrain on the tire degradation just because of the track surface, but
it's newer, but I'm just saying the heat, like how the car is going to react to the atmosphere and everything.
Yeah.
But the tarmac itself should be better. At least it's a newer track. Moving on real quick. Mercedes. What have you guys become? Mercedes has sort of announced that they're going back to the drawing board, huh?
Looks like it.
So the team, we referenced emergency meetings that Ferrari had. Mercedes had one immediately following the race.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get all the heads together and have this emergency meeting, and it looks like they are scrapping this design that they've put together, the side pod list arrow of a car.
It's still technically up in the air, I think, but where I'm at, I don't know that they really have a choice other than to completely start over. It may tweak their timeline a little bit as far as where they think they can compete for race wins, but they've been seems like they've been going back and forth about what they actually wanted or what they should be doing.
Yeah, and what's interesting about scrapping it is they would basically have to develop brand new. It's not like any other season where they could just go back to a previous design. The previous design last season was terrible, and before that was a different regulation. We went through regulation changes. It's a whole new concept of a car. Yeah, different requirements, different rules for what you can and can't have. So anything that they had previously, aside from last year, which was a dog shit car, is out the window. They would literally have to go to redbull.com and find blueprints like everybody else seems to be doing, which is just, it's crazy that a team of their caliber is going through this and has had such a stark fall off. And then again, just, the how big of a spectacle inside the paddock race 1 was. It just had such an influence on so many teams, and Mercedes is one.
Yeah. Well, it
really cast a shadow.
I think Mercedes have been victims of their own success, right? So where they've had a lot of success for a lot of years, and a lot of the people that helped them get there ended up moving on to other teams, and ended up helping those other teams do really well. And and so
that is also, it's just,
it's part of the business, but
that's part of the rigmarole. That's the way sports work. You know what I mean? Other sports have the draft. Sports are cyclical. Every single one. They go in cycles, and Mercedes had a long era of dominance. But it is just crazy because, you see a figure like Toto Wolff, you have a figure like Lewis Hamilton behind the wheel, and you see just, stalwarts of the sport, these icons, these pillars. And it's just interesting, or it's unique, and it's something new to us.
And that's not to say that like the people that took over after or in the current regime are like worse than the people that were before them, but when you don't have maybe the same like resources or the same opportunity to create the same achievements, then you get kind of stuck.
You also look at it in this way. They took a shot on a unique car design, that really skinny, I'm guessing low downforce, because there's nothing for the air to be pushing down on, model of a car, and it did work. So, they tried something different.
And beginning of this year, it looked like they were going to double down on it and try to just make it work. And they quote, hit all of their targets, but the targets just weren't good enough, right? Everyone else's targets were much higher than what theirs were.
So. What do you call it? The something was moved. The marker was moved. The line moved. I think maybe that's the phrase. I don't know.
The goal line.
The goal line moved. That's what I'm looking for. Because there's the dead horse. Red Bull just, outshined everybody. But we had some interesting takes from the drivers themselves. Lewis was quoted as saying that the team he wasn't directly quoted saying this, but he's saying that the team wasn't listening to what he had to say. He was directly quoted as saying, I know what the car needs. And they're not listening to his input on it. He feels.
Yeah. And I've heard that a lot of like the simulations that they've run and the numbers that they've crunched in their development paddock in England that is just not accurate with what they see on the track. And that just goes to show that like they kind of trusted in that for far too long. And this is kind of what the result of that, right? They didn't, when Lewis is saying he needs more of this, more of that, car doesn't feel right to what you're saying. Seems like they were more just looking at the numbers and just trusting that.
Yeah. I mean, look at what happened last year when, teams were just looking at numbers, and then something completely out of left field comes out like porpoising. No team saw that.
And they didn't
that wasn't
figure out how to
simulation.
Tamp it down.
Yeah. So interesting. And then George Russell quoted as saying that Red Bull has got this championship sewn up. I don't think anyone is going to be fighting with them this year. I expect they should win every single race this season. That's my bet. So just more doubling down from other drivers.
Here's the thing. Even though I maybe half agree with George, I still hate that he said this.
Yeah, I do too. Something about him bothers me. Like I wrote down in our notes, is that preemptive crybabying or actual feedback from the team? I just don't feel like he's even in a position to be making such bold statements. Like I don't know who he thinks he is on that team. He's number 2.
Yeah.
He's a number 2 driver. But him to be like, oh, after race 1, Red Bull's going to win every single race this season. That I'm leaning preemptive crybaby. I think there's a chance that Red Bull could do it, and if they do it, that's great. That'd be a fucking feat for us to, witness. But come on.
Sure. And in him saying this, even though it sounds like, oh, he's just being real. To me, it kind of screams of being like having no confidence whatsoever in your team or in your car. And even if you don't, maybe in your heart don't actually, you really think this to be true, just keep it to yourself. Like you sound like you sound like you've already given up.
Yeah, this isn't like a quote that does any good. Like Lewis saying that I know what a car needs does something for the team in letting the team know and letting the world know that there's a communication issue and that it can be fixed.
And then he feels confident in himself.
Yeah.
Right? But when George, on the other hand, is saying, oh, well, we just have no chance. That's it. No one else has any chance. That's it. We're just might as well just like wrap it up and go home. After the first race, you're like, come on, man, like have some dignity. Like go out there and try to fight for a third and
at least say, yeah, they look great. They look untouchable, but we're going to still give it everything. We're going to be on their ass as best we can.
Yeah, we're going to make them work for it.
Yeah, something like that. With George Russell, it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because he was crying when he was at Williams. Now he's crying at Mercedes. And he spent half of last year taking people out in turn one anyways. So
yeah. The guy gets one win and he thinks he knows everything.
Yeah. Send you back to the wall so you can go cry on it. That is, that's about all the news and notes that we have. Do you have any other recap for the week that you want to do?
Let me see. I think that was about it. Wasn't too much news. Oh, there was something that popped up. So I don't know if you remember this from the car unveils, the Alfa Romeo serrated floor edge. Do you remember this?
No.
So I remember seeing the car. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like their floor is like all like serrated. Apparently this was fake. High-level sources within Alfa Romeo have confirmed that the serrated floor design seen at the car launch was a total fake, put on the car as a bit of fun and to distract rival teams as to what it was up to.
Wow.
So
not a fake image.
Not a fake image. They just put out a car design that they didn't intend on actually using, which...
I mean, we kind of were talking about that at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
That car launches.
But to those kind of details, I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's some, as Crofty would put it, cheeky play right there.
Yeah, get the other teams to spend a little bit money researching that just to figure out what that is,
I like that. Yeah. I like that move. That's one of those interesting moves that teams will make, like Mercedes going on radio and saying they're going to pit to make other teams, to juke people out and make other teams
preempt a move,
have to rearrange their strategy. Reminds me of some other stuff, and I think I sent you guys videos of this last season. Just like fun little maneuvers that drivers will do. Like there was that video montage of Ricardo, and he always does this thing where he'll dip his rear wheel into the dirt on a turn. Remember I sent you guys that? That's a cheeky little actual on-track move that drivers do. At least Daniel Ricciardo does, and I'm sure a bunch of other people do, where they'll, on a turn, just give the slightest touch to the dirt, and it'll spray rocks and debris into the driver behind them's face and into their car too, which can't feel good. Roman Grosjean got hit in the finger with a rock one year and almost put him out of the race. So that'll throw people off. That's a cheeky little move right there. I've noticed another one. I don't know if you ever pay attention to when drivers do their tearaways. You ever seen this?
I've seen a tearaway flag here and there, yeah.
If you watch it more, start paying attention to when one car is on another car's ass and like getting ready to make a move on them, you will notice that drivers will do their tearaway right at that moment, even if they're in the middle of a fight. And I think it's in the chance, in the 99th percentile, the smallest margin of a chance that tearaway is going to get sucked into the intake.
Yeah, or distract them or anything, yeah.
Distract them, go into a brake duct, because we've seen what that can do. It happened to Chuck last season. So that's fun. That's fun team play, fun driver on track.
Love it.
Antics. Let's so after round one, we got to see our fantasy league standings. A lot of shit talk from you towards me.
Sure.
Going into this season.
Uh-huh.
And I'm happy to say that after round one of fantasy, I picked a perfect team.
Perfect, you say.
I picked, without playing, what is it, the new regulation I'm talking about it like it's like it's actual Formula One. the new rules of fantasy F1 this year, where you can, basically the Mega Driver of last year, but the 3 times chip, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
If I had played that on Fernando Alonso, I would have gotten the maximum number of points available. Awesome. But team-wise, for just like the standard picks, I hit a home run.
Yeah, you scored a 299.
That was the most you could get without playing the 3 times chip.
Yeah, you had Max as a 2X. You had Alonso, Stroll, Perez, Joe, and then your 2 constructors were Aston Martin and Red Bull Racing.
Mm-hmm. So, standings after round 1. Shit, I just exited it. Son of a... Here. Yeah, bring it up right there. Don't go to the Global League. Go to ours.
I know, sorry.
Standings after round 1. Myself, Helmut Marko's left eye.
Yeah, 299. I'm below you in second place with 279. So,
and maybe, what were you going to say?
So, not too far away. 20 points, that's
not a lot. 20 points is not a lot. This is going to be a good battle.
Yeah, because we got a little gap to third place. J Money's at 209.
Jonathan, potentially the Aston Martin of fantasy this year.
I know. Didn't even pick.
He didn't pick his team this year?
Or he didn't pick any S. Or he did pick. Yeah, he had Lance. He just didn't have Fernando.
I don't know what he's doing with that team. Let's not talk too much about fantasy, but go back. So, me in first, Brandon in second, J Money in third.
This is why you wanted to bring it up, so you could tell everybody how you're in first place.
That's all.
That was the whole play.
That's all.
That's why, just so everybody knows, Channing started a podcast so that he could brag about getting first place.
That's not all. I thought it would just be a funny thing, or a fun follow. Church of Checo's in fourth. Go back to that.
Well, we can't read all of these here.
We can't read one. Susie Wolfstand account in fifth. Strolling with my homies in sixth. Let's go full throttle in seventh, and then we'll just call this last one KJ. Pulling up the rear. Saudi preview. Let's do 3 bold predictions for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Less than a week away.
You can go first.
First bold prediction for me. Max wins. No.
I don't know if that's bold.
It's not bold. I will say bold prediction number 1, a Williams in the points.
Okay.
I will say Alex Albon back in the points this season, this race. And Alex Albon back in the points. 3 teams on the podium.
Okay.
And a McLaren finishes dead last.
Which one?
Oscar Piastri.
So back-to-back DNFs for Oscar?
Not DNF, but he will finish dead last, whatever that is.
I feel like it's more likely that Oscar DNFs than gets last place.
Okay. You want to do that as one of your bold picks?
Sure.
Okay.
Second bold pick, I'll say... Where did Pierre finish last race? Was it 9th?
9th.
I'll say he'll get top 10 again.
See that?
And then bold. Has to be bold. I don't know if it's bold enough, but I feel like Fernando top 3 again.
Not that bold, but okay.
If I need to go more bold, I'll say
that's up to you. I mean, what kind of a character do you have?
Well, we won't get into that, but second bold.
This would be your third bold.
Third bold. I'll say
I never noticed how goofy Nick DeVries' driver photo is.
What's wrong?
I mean, from where I'm seeing it, it almost looks like he's making a goofy face.
I mean, it's kind of a goofy guy.
He's got like toupee hair, huh?
No, it's just a little weird right there.
Okay.
All right. Let's say Nico also top 10.
Top 10. Now that's bold. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a real shuffling of the deck chairs. I can get in with that. Okay. We'll see what we do with those predictions on following the race. We'll see how we do. Maybe we'll go 6 for 6. I doubt it.
Yeah, we'll see. What do we get if we win? All 6.
Yeah, maybe we'll do like a point system.
Okay.
Like for how many bold predictions come true. We'll fuck around with that. We can have our own little fantasy thing. This has been the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix preview. We are Into the Chicane, a Formula One podcast. Check us out next week with our Saudi Arabian Grand Prix post-show recap. I'm Channing Apodaca. That's B. Wood.
Peace.
Peace.